The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
Facing the best team in the NBA on the second night of a back-to-back, no problem for the Heat, who notched their third straight win.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast.
Recording this after the Heat's 122-113 win over the Cavs. They beat the Suns and Cavs in back-to-back games over the weekend, and they have won 3 straight games for the first time this season. David, obviously a big-time win over a Cavs team that came into the night with just 3 losses on the season, the best record in the NBA. I've been asking for a stretch of quality basketball for what seems like multiple regular seasons now. And the Heat might be putting that together right now with these wins. This is quality stuff. And they're playing their best basketball of the season. There's no question.
Of that, there is no question. Absolutely. A third straight win and knocking off, look, an inferior Lakers team that's kind of been reeling defensively specifically. They took on the Phoenix Suns without Kevin Durant, and it was a close one, but it was still a good win. And then to knock off the Cavaliers and really not dominate, but at least be consistently good all throughout. There wasn't a bad stretch at any point throughout the 48 minutes of gameplay. And I think that was really impressive to see this Heat not just put pressure on early, but maintain it. They had their full team. They were fully healthy. They chose not to play certain players that we've seen get minutes over the last few weeks, and it still worked out very well for Miami. And one player who got a lot of minutes, who we'll talk a little bit later, a newfound Heat gem, perhaps, who really contributed, especially in the fourth quarter. And on top of that, just, again, to be able to beat this team, you look at the offensive numbers, they're pretty even. Like, this is a really good Cavaliers offensive team. They've got some questions defensively, but they have blown the doors open on a number of opponents throughout the season. They can find a way to outscore. They get quick transition buckets. They've got a really potent offense. And you look at the numbers, not to say that they were pedestrian necessarily, but they shot well from the field. They held them down to their season averages. And the thing that really stood out to me was Miami's rebounding. That, I think, was really the consistent aspect of the game where Miami was really dominant in creating much more opportunity for them, not just to stop possessions for Cleveland, but also to ignite new ones for the Heat as well. So I really liked the way that Miami was just pursuing the ball, making sure that they were pulling down those rebounds, securing them, and again, denying the Cavaliers the opportunity to get a second chance.
They outscored Cleveland 19-10 in second chance points. And in a game that was, within it was like a 10-point game in the fourth quarter. Cleveland kind of got back into it, made it a 5-point game at one. I never really felt like in the fourth that I was worried about the Heat kind of losing this game. But, you also have to have a certain amount of respect for the Cavs, who have been, the best team in the league, by their record this season. Like, you're not going to just assume that you can walk through this win. And yet we did still get about a minute worth of garbage time here. But a tremendous Heat win. Worth noting, Evan Mobley goes down early in the game, isn't out the second half. So that is a big part of this. But you look at the rest of the box score here. I mean, Cleveland, 41 of 86 overall. Miami, 41 of 86 overall. Like, this was a very closely played game here. And I think you already made the best point. The Heat, wire to wire, just played good basketball. And Tyler Hero, 19 points in that third quarter, really kind of carried them in that second half. But then you got Jimmy Butler going in the fourth quarter. Duncan Robinson had big spots, especially in the first half. Bam, I thought, was just so important for them, especially defensively in this game. Led the team in plus minus at plus 20, and was efficient, offensively. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that Miami's best stretch of basketball has coincided with Bam kind of getting off the schneid a little bit offensively also.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Bam seems to have gone. I hesitate to say it, but he started off with some really good stretches against Anthony Davis against the Lakers, where he was really aggressive defensively, and then seemed to get his scoring going a little bit. Against the Suns with no use of Nurkic, again, very comfortable. Seems to be confident in his shot, something that he hadn't been prior to the Lakers game. Same thing today. While he wind up not having a huge monster game, you could see the comfort level kind of returning back to its baseline, especially when he's shooting those mid-range jumpers. Like he had a couple of drives where he went up against Jared Allen, kind of shoved him out of the way a little bit or created a little space there, wasn't afraid of letting go of that floater, much more comfortable in how it looks. And just, again, there were moments there earlier in the season where he wasn't sure what kind of shot was he taking, like where you could, as you pointed out before, almost seemed like he was hearing Eric Spoelstra saying, don't shoot the mid-range jumper. Now he's saying, you know what, this is my shot. I've got to take it, especially when it's available to me. And he knows what to do. The touch is back. It looks much better. The floater, the shot there, the mid-range jumper, especially in the painted area, looks much more in form and fluid. So I and he had a couple of threes as well. So you have to look at that and say, you know what, a nice performance for Bam overall. And defensively, I think he did a really good job. So it's all working out. And look, he doesn't have to handle the scoring load. He's kind of found his balance now where he's like, you know what? I don't have to be the team's top scorer now that Jimmy's back. And at the same time, he's still much more efficient in his shot taking. And Tyler, Terry, Duncan tonight, all of them can take over some spots there where they can carry the offensive load and let Bam do what he does best and just be more of a contributor offensively.
So the Heat have won 5 of the last 7 games.
Yep.
The 2 losses that they have, there's a bad one in Toronto. That's a tough one.
It is.
And then the Boston one, we did sort of a, start throwing stuff off the ship type of, type of show after that. But, you consider no Jimmy Butler in that one. The fact that the Boston Celtics are an awesome basketball team. And maybe if you're the Heat, realistically, second night of a back-to-back on the road, best that you could hope for is just being competitive. And they were not competitive in that game, but again, with no Jimmy Butler. So you don't write that game off. I don't think that that's fair. But then you follow that up with 3 straight wins, and you can obviously poke holes in it. Like the Lakers are having a real tough go of it right now. Phoenix was without Kevin Durant. Cleveland didn't have Evan Mobley in the second half of this game, which was impactful to this game. I do think the Heat still outplayed Cleveland, even when Evan Mobley was on the court. But, these things you do have to consider. But the other part of this is that Miami's playing good basketball, and they're healthy, right? And so often, the beginning of this season, certainly last season, I think the opponents were the team that was sort of walking into sort of a skeleton crew Miami Heat team, right? Because so many games missed to injury and all these things. This team is finally healthy. You've got Jimmy Butler playing second nights of back-to-backs and all these things. Like it finally kind of feels like it's the Heat's turn to take advantage of some of this regular season schedule stuff, where that's not been the case for these last couple of years, and that's okay. I'm not going to apologize for that, right? Like, beat up on these teams, win your games. You're starting to string together some home wins, which is huge. You got Toronto coming up on Thursday night at home. You got a long break after this weekend back-to-back. They don't play until Thursday, and then that's the only game of this week because then they don't play again until next Monday, the 16th, and that's in Detroit. So there's a real chance that they can win 5 in a row before they play the Thunder on December 20th, which is obviously going to be a really tough game. But, within this stretch, you got the Celtics, you got the Cavs, you got the Thunder. Those are the 3 best teams by record in the league. And within that stretch, you have some games against not so great opponents. And I think that's, like I said, I'm not going to apologize for the stretch of the schedule. Miami has kind of gotten the short end of the straw or the short end of the stick in that regard for years now, and they're finally healthy and taking advantage of a little bit of a soft spot here.
Yeah, I like what Tyler Hero said post-game. He said, we just want to concentrate on having more good days than bad days. And the Boston Celtics game obviously was a bad day, but you look at what they've done since then, and they haven't withered. They haven't let that loss, as debilitating as it was and how lopsided as it was, it hasn't defined them. They found a way to bounce back. And I think that's really impressive, is that this team has shown a resiliency that I wasn't, quite frankly, sure that they had. We've seen it. I kind of chalked it all up. I was still optimistic, cautiously so, about this group, knowing that they expect to be able to flip the switch in the postseason, but that's so far from now. And you have to be able to show some mettle. You have to be able to show some tenacity, and they've done that. Tonight's win, again, to call it a signature win, I think that's a no-brainer. It's the best game that they've played against a really good team. And yeah, Cleveland's on the second night of back-to-back, and Miami's at home. That's fine. That's what you're supposed to do. If you can go in there and handle this kind of a challenge, and to do so consistently, regardless of who's on the floor for either opponent or for your team either. I mean, you have to be able to show the ability to win and beat these opponents when they have moments of weakness there, or when they have some kind of injury or something like that. You have to be able to take advantage. So I think it's really interesting that Miami has been able to bounce back the way they have from the Boston Celtics loss and string together 3 great wins and possibly even more. I think it is the start of something positive. I was surprised. Look, I looked at this week and it was supposed to be perhaps the most challenging week of the season. I know we had looked at a few stretches earlier when they went on the road trip, but they were without Jimmy for part of that road trip. And certainly they didn't live up to the little expectation that we had that they might be able to find success. But you look at this, and this could have been a really poorly defining stretch for Miami. They could have lost to the Lakers. They could have lost to Phoenix, regardless of who was out there. It was a tough game for them. And certainly hosting Cleveland, regardless of the circumstances, that's a tough challenge for a really good Cleveland team. And Miami handled it. And so I've been really impressed with the way that they've been able to stretch these wins together. And hopefully it'll be the start of something even more.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
No Fred VanVleet, no Tari Eason, no problem as the Houston Rockets get back on track. It's exciting to be able to talk about a Rockets basketball win after a couple losses. They got back on track in this game, man.
Yeah, man, good win for the Rockets. I mean, we played the shorthanded Clippers, but we were shorthanded as well. And the Rockets handled business. I think the guys came out with, Emme was talking about how we were being a little bit soft, but I think they came out ready to go, ready to get in and active, scrap it up defensively. And our guys, without our, steady hand, Fred VanVleet, without our leader, the guys got in and ran the offense as a collective, and we played very well. It was a good peek into the future because Fred won't always be there to save these Rockets and settle them down. So it was good to see them get the win, together as a collective.
Absolutely. Look, they got back to playing Rockets basketball. And again, they didn't do it at full strength, right? So no Fred VanVleet. He was sitting out with the knee contusion that he suffered against the Sacramento Kings. Still no Tari Eason. He was in concussion protocol. And then the Clippers also were not at full strength. They had no James Harden. They didn't have Amir Coffey, who injured himself apparently during pregame warmups. And then they lost Derrick Jones Jr. after he played like 12 minutes in this game. And then he didn't come back. So Clippers all banged up and down the roster. They also didn't have Terrence Mann available. So two teams missing a lot of their key contributors, but doesn't matter. Rockets still got the win. And that's where we're going to start talking about this game first and foremost. Is this was kind of a sketchy game, right? With no Fred VanVleet. This is a Rockets team that has kind of lived and died based on how well Fred has played pretty much over the entire course that Fred has been a Rocket, right? Like, we've seen the on-off numbers. We've seen this team when Fred goes to the bench, and sometimes the offense like completely stalls out and they can't manufacture any points. And yet in this game, They had some turnovers. They had a bit of an ugly, kind of rough first half, and then that little stint there at the top of the third quarter. Ime calls that top of the third quarter timeout. It was like 2 minutes in, and the Rockets had 4 turnovers in under 2 minutes at the top of the third quarter. Ime called a timeout. They didn't turn the ball over for the rest of the game after that timeout. So he reinforced, he doubled down. He said, no, we got to clean this up. But they were able to, I won't go so far to say thrive without Fred on the court, but they made it work without Fred out there. And it took a collect, right? It was a little bit of Jalen running the show. Thompson was running the show. Alpe was running the show. They did it collectively.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I felt like the team knew what it wanted to do, and it got in and out of its sets pretty well. And I thought a lot of the turnovers were really caused by, and the Clippers have of late been a very, very effective and very good defensive team. And you could see how active their hands were, especially on the backside help. I think they really surprised the Rockets with their backside help, poking the ball behind away from the Rockets players. It happened to Şengün a bunch of times. It happened to it happened to all of our guys. But once they got that figured out, that's how they're getting their turnovers. I thought the Rockets played with a sense of purpose. They knew what they wanted to get in and out of their sets. They trusted one another. They moved the ball well, and more importantly, they shot it pretty good from the field, if you ask me. I mean, especially for a team that could really struggle to score. We generated good shots. I thought our process was good, and when we took care of the ball, we played well. And so that was really encouraging to see with Fred off the floor. I thought that collective of Jalen, Amen running the offense, and Şengün really running the offense in those second quarters, those backup units when Jalen and Amen were off the floor. I thought it worked for the Rockets, and it was a kind of a peer into the future of what we can begin to see when Fred isn't on the team.
Yeah, the Rockets as a team in this one of their better shooting performances of the season, easily. They shot 15 of 41 from downtown, 36.6% compared to the Clippers, who were only 11 of 34 from downtown, 32.4% there. And look, you look at the assist numbers, and they don't jump off the page at you, right? Like, Jalen only had 1 assist. Amen Thompson only had 4 assists. Şengün had 6 assists. But the thing is first off, Jalen and Amen, I thought both did great jobs driving, getting downhill, trying to collapse the defense, right? And then making that kick out pass and then getting the defense in rotation. It's not always going to be the guy who collapses the defense or who initiates the action is going to walk away with the assist. And there were even possessions where, like, Jalen would initiate the offense, right? Get downhill, collapse, and then relocate, and then the ball would find him again for a 3-pointer. And that's good process. That's good high quality offense. And so that's how those two guys did it. And for Şengün, you might look at this game and think, oh, well, Şengün had a really off night, quiet game, 11 points, 4 of 9 shooting. The reason Şengün was 4 of 9, the reason only had 9 shot attempts, was because the Clippers defense was so tilted towards shutting him down every time he got the basketball. First and foremost, what's his name? Nicholas Batum had 2 hands on Şengün like the entire game. When you have a small checking a big, you get away with so much more stuff. Trust the Rockets benefit from this. When they have like Dillon Brooks guarding bigs, when they put Dillon Brooks on like Wemby, you use that leverage, and those smaller guys are able to be a little bit more physical with the bigs. So Şengün needs to find a way to be able to power through some of that at times, but some of that, some of his lack of opportunities, I guess, in this game came from Rockets not being able to get him the entry passes at times, that kind of stuff. But when he did get the ball, he did a really great job of recognizing, okay, the defense is tilted towards me. There's a second man here in the dunker spot, whatever. Let me kick the pass out, or let me make 1 or 2 moves and then find the next guy. And that's what led to some really high quality offense in those second unit groups.
Yeah, we like to see Şengün get going a little bit easier. I mean, a little bit more. I thought, once again, Şengün missed a couple bunnies. I thought he also got set up a couple times by Jalen and got fouled and couldn't finish at the rim, when typically a guy of his stature and touch should be able to finish at the rim. And that kind of kept him from getting going offensively. Typically, I think Fred does a good job of finding some really easy looks and gets him confident and gets his touch really going around the rim. And I think we just didn't get enough of those opportunities, but those opportunities were there. And because the defense was so shifted and geared towards taking Şengün away, especially in the short roll, like there were so many times where they were overloading on that short roll, which honestly gave Jalen a lot of those driving lanes he got to get downhill and kick out to other shooters. So it's just a give and take there. Jalen has to continue to punish those teams for taking that away from Şengün, and so that will be available later in the game, and Şengün can get some easy looks. But I think all in all, the team played well together as a collective, and we just got to give Amen also his flowers for initiating the offense and really playing within his role in doing that.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You're going to want to check out some lines from Monday Night Football. The Bengals favored by 5.5 at Jerry World over the Cowboys. I have to start Cooper Rush in fantasy. The Simpsons broadcast is looking at some high-scoring football and has the total 49.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Brandon Ingram is out indefinitely after suffering an ankle sprain.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast.
So let's get started with the rough and sad and bad news of the day, and that was Brandon Ingram spraining his ankle, getting injured really in that game on Saturday against the Oklahoma City Thunder, stepping on Lou Dort after Dort flopped. He got hit in the face a little bit, but he completely flopped to the ground, and as Ingram came down from that, landed on his ankle. So gets injured on a bit of a flop there, which is just unbelievably disappointing. From the Pelicans, New Orleans Pelicans announced today that forward Brandon Ingram has been diagnosed with a high-grade low left ankle sprain. Medical imaging taken last night confirmed the injury, which occurred during the third quarter of last night's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. His return to play timeline will be determined by how he responds to treatment and rehabilitation. Further updates will be distributed appropriately. So he is out indefinitely is what this is being referred to as. I think from past years, the Pelicans don't really want to put a timeline on some of these injuries. And when you watched this happen in real time, it looked nasty. You know, the saving grace is that this isn't an ACL tear or anything like that. And those don't usually happen by landing on someone. So I tweeted that out right after the fact that it's probably not going to be that, but this just sucks, right? Overall, this could not have come at a worse time for the Pelicans and for Brandon Ingram. You know, this team was finally healthy for exactly 1.5 games. You know, we could at least get a chance to somewhat see what could have been for New Orleans. You know, you don't have Zion Williamson, but the idea was, could this group that they assembled of Zion, Ingram, DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Yves Missi, or Daniel Tice, whoever was going to be their center, would that unit work? And we're probably not, I don't know if we'll get to see a minute of them play at all, right? Zion didn't play in the opener. And from there, just everything spiraled downhill for New Orleans. We're maybe going to see Zion Williamson in January is kind of what we're assuming. But some of the reporting from Shams Charania has not been promising in that, even if the Pelicans have been kind of good about what they've said when it comes to him. This is just so unbelievably disappointing. It's just like a curse. Look, I really wish I had more for y'all, but you know, what has New Orleans done to deserve this? We just like to have fun here and just be ourselves. And man, the basketball gods really aren't taking a liking to this iteration, this generation of the New Orleans Pelicans. 1.5 games of being healthy before this happens again. And it wasn't like Ingram did anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. It's just a play where you land on somebody. So the Ingram injury, I would not expect him back anytime soon is what this is sounding like. You know, a high grade, low left ankle sprain, a high grade sprain can mean some ligament damage, potential tears in there, but probably not to that extreme here. But a high grade ankle sprain can keep an NBA player out at minimum a month. This one looked pretty bad, pretty rough based on his reaction. He had to be helped off the court by his teammates. He could not put any weight on it whatsoever. And when he came down on it, like the immediate thing that I remember was that DeMarcus Cousins injury, where he kind of just went down and was like, nope, nope, nope. And that was kind of what you saw here. So in a sense, it being a high-grade ankle sprain is positive. It's not positive, but by comparison's sake, it definitely is. But I don't anticipate him being back anytime soon. And we'll get into it in the next segment here. Could this have been the last game that he played? And I think there's definitely a feel of that. We don't know if that'll be the case. We'll see how he responds. But also when it comes to injuries for Ingram, those seem to drag on a little bit. This is not someone who wants to play unless he is 100%. And look, you know, depending on what you thought about him in that playoff series against OKC last year, he might not have been fully healthy. Maybe that impacts him, though I think that just had more to do with Zion not being there and Ingram not being like a true number one guy. But overall, like, this hurts. You know, I guess the good news is it's not like it's going to sink the season for New Orleans. We'll get into Ingram specifically in the next segment here, but, you know, on the team side of it and from the team perspective, it's not like it changes much. This team is already bad. They're really basically at this point out of playoff contention almost assuredly, even for the 10th spot. So it's not like you go from being a good team to like, oh, great, now we're going to miss the postseason. We're going to miss a ton of games, you know, whatever it might be. It probably doesn't impact like a whole lot when it comes to playoff probabilities and things like that. Still looking at it, New Orleans, along with the Washington Wizards per Basketball Dash reference, is the only is the only. I'm pulling up the BRI for the ESPN, whatever it is, basketball strength. I'll find it later. It's not like it's going to change much. They're already bad. This just makes them worse. It's not like you were a team, now you fall. It's just, oh yeah, this is going to be disappointing. But it does kind of, in a sense, feel like it closes the book on an era here. He could play later on this season, and if you're him, you should. And I think that'll be an important thing, and we'll get into that in the next segment here. But overall, now you don't get to see him and CJ and Murray, and what those guys look like together. And that's just super disappointing, right? Every move they've made has kind of been undermined, due to no fault of its own by just other things. And this just group has not been able to get healthy and play together like whatsoever for a couple of years now. It's bad when my mom is texting me and calling me and being like, they've got to just start over and I'm sick of all of this, right? Like that's never a good thing here. So that's kind of where we are. Just a disappointing injury in a disappointing season. At least it doesn't derail it. If you're looking for a silver lining, that's kind of what I got here for you. Well, so what's it mean, right? Okay, we get the injury. He's not coming back for minimum a month, let's say. Probably longer than that. What does it mean? My first gut feeling on this is it does feel like it could be his final game in New Orleans. I don't know if it will be, and I think there's a good chance he plays again this season, but it does have that sense of finality to it. They've been actively trying to trade him, but haven't found any takers. And now with an injury, let's say it puts him out for a month and a half. So he returns around January 20th or so. The trade deadline is pretty much 2 weeks after that. His value's only going to have gone down if you don't have anyone offering much for him, and no one really is. They weren't even in the off season. They weren't asking the world either. They weren't asking for that much. His value's only going to go down. So I struggle to find an area where they trade him, just at the contract that he's on and making the logistics of that work out, right? So even if he plays, they're not going to be able to move him. So trade deadline passes. He's still on the Pelicans, and now that leads to the offseason. There's no money in free agency. The Nets aren't going to sign him to a big deal. The Pistons won't have as much money as you think in free agency when it comes to that. There just aren't going to be takers there, really, when it comes to it. So he can either re-sign here in New Orleans or try and find a sign-and-trade situation. But again, no one's giving him what he wants. If someone was going to give him a max and he wanted to play there, they could have, right? Jake Fisher the other day reported on Mark Stein's Substack, which I pay for and you should subscribe to, especially since they got Jake Fisher there, who's one of the better insiders, in my opinion, in the league, said there were no substantial talks with the Utah Jazz about it. And that's one of the teams that we've heard, mentioned a good bit in there. And while I think there were some exploratory talks, it's Danny Ainge, right? There's nothing really going to happen. So if they weren't going to do it, then where's it going to be, right? Where's the trade going to happen? And I'm not really sure. Not at the money amount that he wants, not at the dollar amount that he wants. So does he re-sign here in New Orleans? Look, if you're the Pelicans and they like him, and Ingram likes to be here, I think one of the things, even with like signing with Clutch and all that, is he's not like, get me the heck out, right? I said on the show the other day, like, I don't see how it could get messier here. One, that's not really Ingram, and I don't think that was going to be the case anyway, and I certainly don't think it's going to be the case now after the injury, right? If you're the Pelicans, this injury has to lower his value in your eyes. They've talked to him about extensions that are below the max. He wants an average value of $52 million a year. He's not going to get that. Would New Orleans sign him at 40? I think they would be very open to that. But when you look at how many games he's missed in a Pelicans uniform, can you really do that? Even if you get him on what you would call a team-friendly deal, $38 to $40 million a year, let's say, can you really sign him to that when it's another injury? And again, it's not his fault. I don't want to say soft or anything like that. This one isn't his fault. But can you really do that? Can you really sign someone who at this point looks a little injury prone to a long-term deal that is important, for your team? I'm trying to pull up how many games he's missed as a Pelican here to see if we can find out. And I think the answer is no, right? Like 40 million? No. 30? Sure. You can take a risk on a guy for that kind of money. But at 40 million, like, no, I really don't think you can. And so this injury, especially if he misses 2 months, or maybe he misses the rest of the season, right? Maybe they're just like, yeah, no, you don't need to play, and we're just going to kind of shut it down for the year. Because at that point, if he were to be coming back in, say, February, say it's 2 months, right? 2 months from today is just after the trade deadline. It's February 6th, I think. I might be wrong on that. I don't have it in front of me. What's the point of playing anymore? No one, 2 months of play, even if it's good, isn't going to raise his trade value or anything like that. It just kind of is what it is. So at that point, do they just shut him down? And they might. And at that point, you just can't sign him to, a 5-year, $200 million deal. That doesn't seem smart, especially because you're not getting rid of Zion and you still these two don't play. Right? Like that's the issue here. You just can't sign him long-term, even if he wants to be here. On the right contract, sure. 150 over 5 at 30 million a year. Yeah, you do that. Everyone's going to need to get used to sticker shock when it comes to this. Like Trey Murphy's going to look underpaid in the future. When you start seeing guys making 60, $70 million per season in the NBA. But Ingram has missed a lot of time in New Orleans with injuries the past couple of years. And he's going to miss even more time. And that's just, can you do it? And I think the answer to that feels like no. So even if you want to bring him back, even if he's amenable to a really team-friendly deal, like, yeah, sure, you obviously do it. But I don't know if you feel good about that necessarily. And this has nothing to do with Brandon Ingram, the human, or anything like that. But you look at the games played here, and it's not great, right? You had 20. So once we got past like the lockout, the shortened years here, because not the lockout, the COVID years, right? So skip the 2020, 2021 season. I'm about to sneeze as I'm recording here. And oh, sorry. If you look at 2023, 2024, 2025, right? He played 45 games in 2022, 2023. 64 last year is not bad. Not amazing. It's not the threshold to, win an award or anything like that. That's 65 games. And this year, he's going to miss even more time. That's a lot of games missed. That is a lot of games missed. He's only played 70 games one time in his NBA career. He's only played 60 3 times in his 9 years in the league, one of those being a shortened year. It's tough. Right? This is one of the reasons why, potentially people want to move on from Brandon Ingram, or not Brandon Ingram, sorry, Zion Williamson, the same thing. Like, he's just not there. He's not playing. To quote Mike Detillier here, the best ability is availability. And these guys haven't shown it. You could maybe get by with one of those guys, but the other, no. So here's the thing, though. Can New Orleans afford to let him walk? And we'll look at this later in the year, just let him walk. We'll look at it from the salary cap perspective, right? Can you just let him walk without getting some mid-tier salary back, some other guys back? Could you trade him right now for 2 $15 million guys? Would you do that deal? Those guys can be movable in the future with your draft picks or other things like that to try and upgrade the roster. Because even if you just let them walk, they're not in a good salary cap situation necessarily. They still wouldn't be in a bad one, but it puts them in, very much a predicament here, it feels like, and that's not great. And so this injury, look, it definitely is going to hurt Brandon Ingram's contract. No one's going to offer him the max. Not that anyone was before, but I think this is also going to impact what the high-end number teams were going to offer him. They were like, no, we're not going to offer you 52, but we'll offer you 45 a year. Are they going to offer that now? This could not have come at a worse time for Brandon Ingram, and that sucks for him. It really does. Like this, no one wins in this situation whatsoever. This is just one of those where it absolutely sucks and it's disappointing, but that is just how this season is going in New Orleans.